I'm really honored to be moderating the session here on how we can make something as critical as assessments much more meaningful and joyful for all learners. And with me here I have 4 guests who are helping me to share insights on the different forms of assessments. So I'd like to welcome Camilla Uhre. She's also partly our host here at the International School of Billund in Denmark, and she is the head of the school actually since 2014, and before that she was also the chair of the school board and was critical in the whole setup of the school here. So thank you very much for coming, Camilla.
Thank you.
Next to Camilla I have Dr. Mauro Giacomazzi. Mauro is the technical advisor for Luigi Giussani Institute of Higher Education in Kampala in Uganda. He also has a master in economics and a PhD in education. And he is an education enthusiast, contributed to the growth of various local education institutions in East Africa for more than 16 years. He also has a rich experience in implementing various professional development programs to improve teacher competency. So welcome, Mauro.
Thank you very much.
And also Pablo Jaramillo. Pablo is the CEO of Alianza Educativa in Colombia, which is a network of 11 schools and 1 private schools serving more than 12,000 children from underserved communities in Bogota and Cartagena. Prior to Alianza Educativa, Pablo served as Deputy Minister of K-12 Education in Colombia and was also a former CEO of several non-profit organizations. Welcome, Pablo.
Thank you.
And Rob Houben, welcome. Rob is founder of alllearners.org and also founding member of the Green School South Africa's Board of Advisors. And I've heard from Rob that despite that he was not very fond of his secondary education, he actually became a teacher back in 2000. And he really wanted to make a difference for the current system as we have it right now. So in 2015, he started at Agora, a public secondary school in the Netherlands. And it's a particular kind of school that operates without timetables, without classes, and across age groups. So that is the basis of which he has founded his new organization, alllearners.org, to help many more schools and organizations worldwide to use this type of mindset. Welcome, Rob.
Oh, thanks, Mo.
So in the spirit of this conference, to put play at the center and the overall theme for today, which is more than one way to play, for us it's also more than one way to learn. And in order to nurture that, it's also more than one way to assess. So what we are trying to focus on in the LEGO Foundation programs is how do we support learning through play all around the world. And a critical lever for that is to make assessments much more meaningful and joyful to enable much more engaging forms of learning. So meaningful and joyful forms of assessments are not in opposition to learning outcomes and the success of schools or students. So we hope that this session can inspire all of you and educators around the world with some practical, meaningful, joyful examples of how assessments can enhance learning. And we'll start with a round of examples to demonstrate how does that look like. So Camilla, how does it look like in the International School of Billund?
Well, I was only allowed to bring 1 or 2 examples, so it looks in many ways, and this is the test of this morning. So, at ISB, we do believe in learning through play. We also work with what does it look like, how does it feel like, and what we know is that what's playful for one may not be playful for another, so that's one of our findings very early on. But this choice, Wonder Delight, actually was based on the first 2 years. I mean, we are a very young school, but the first 2 years we were observing and documenting, and we also managed to conclude indicators of playful learning in schools. What is a playful learning experience? So choice, Wonder Delight is something that we work with in everything we do. And these not so stable bricks.
That's good.
It's something we play with.
Yeah.
And this example is actually from one of our before classes. So it's 10-year-old students, because when we assess, we also want to assess how we learn. And the way we learn best. So they actually did it in a way where they put out all of these different words, challenges, a lot of words that the students then would pick from. And then, you know, they looked at it and then they reflected. Did they have fun, or who picked? Someone picked focus. These are their bricks. So you picked a word that was part of your reflection. And they made this beautiful model that I will have to remake. But it's not just done with a model, and it's not just for the tangible, tactile things. They also then took a deeper dive where they then shared why they picked that word. So this was an example of how we assess a playful learning experience. And why do we do that? Because play is how we learn best. We know it, so we should do it. Choice Wonder Delight is also used when I plan for staff meetings, for a lesson. So it's there, it's present. Another example, I'll be really fast, because assessment is really important to our development, and assessment is what keeps us growing. So we do a lot of assessments in playful ways. One of the other examples also for 10-year-olds is thinking routines. This is pre-assessments. So see, think, wonder, where they were looking at, what was it? It was traditions and cultural beliefs. So the students were presented for various ways of living and doing that. So what they reflect on was see, think, wonder. And I think the pre-assessment is so important, because the teachers need to start and work with the students where they are. So we need to know where they are before we can then later on assess them. So pre-assessment, and the most assessment, choice, wonder, delight.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Camilla. I love the way it's adaptable and flexible. And
it's very flexible.
It's flexible, very much. Oh, and I saw hygge here.
Hygge, yeah.
It's a Danish hygge, yeah. So it's culturally, you can basically adapt it to your different contexts?
Yeah. We have a lot of visitors at ISB where some are playing with it.
Yeah.
So we do choice, wonder, delight. I think everyone keeps that.
Yeah.
But the words, everyone adds a national, local component. And hygge is very Danish. Hygge is coziness. I mean, if you have hygge when you learn, you're fine. You do well. So I think the joy of learning is really important. So the indicators for us is important in assessment.
Thank you so much, Camilla.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's move on to Mauro. Please share one of the tools that you have been using in your work.
Okay. No. It's just a small model.
Yeah.
That, what I will be presenting today, speaking about today, is the teacher replay tool that we have been using. It is an online instrument that can be used for formative assessment of learning through play. I wanted to bring in this small model of a classroom. Imagine that in Uganda we have a classroom with not 9 students like here, but with 60, 70 students. And the common practice is that when you are a teacher and you enter the classroom, you shut the door. And whatever happens in that classroom is somehow your own business. And those of us that have been in the classroom, we know how much we like to speak sometimes, and we know how much we tend to like our own voice. And we tend even to measure the success of our work according to how we have experienced that classroom, how well we spoke, how well we presented our topics. So the effort that we did with Teacher Replay was to change the perspective. In a classroom like this, in a model like this, usually we only have the teacher that is speaking in front of all our students. What instead we are trying to invite the teachers to do is to start asking the students, first of all, what they think about their learning and what they think about what is going on. And then we also ask some support teachers or some colleagues to enter the classroom and be an observant to that classroom, to be somebody else that is looking at the same classroom. This is challenging the perspective and the beliefs of the teacher, because first of all, the teacher has to open up, has to accept the fact that there is somebody else that could say, maybe you should have improved here, improved there. But second, the teacher that is assisting to the classroom, and we can see it in a slide, is supposed to speak to these students and ask the students, how did you play?
Yeah.
How did you enjoy the moment of playing? How was that experience? And this goes and feeds back to the teacher who was implementing. And for the first time, sometimes in their life, they start asking themselves, well, maybe I could have done it differently.
Yeah.
Maybe I thought that I had planned it really, really well, but as a matter of fact, it turned out to be not so exciting for the students.
Yeah.
So our intention with the teacher replay is to introduce this true meaning of a formative assessment. That is a way not to test the children, but a way to ask yourself, what am I really doing, and what kind of objective do I want to achieve, and how do I want to achieve it?
Let's see the slide you had also. I think it was up again.
Yes.
So
yes.
So you didn't have a situation, and then you have an app. Is that right?
Yes, there is an app that is a teacher replay that can be downloaded both on the App Store or in the Play Store, and on the side. Okay, the app is very simple, very intuitive. Even our teacher in Uganda, they find it much more simple and useful and easy to use than the paper version. We have also a paper version, but they find it so easy that they want to use only the app. And then you see the picture in which the teacher himself, in case there is not an assistant, or the assistant teacher that was present during the lesson, interviews somehow, has a focus group discussion with the children and start asking them very simple questions. What do you enjoy most? What didn't you enjoy? And this becomes a circle that feeds back.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Mauro. And I love the way it becomes a tool of interactions and conversation around the environment and between the teachers and the students. So thank you very much for that example. From the context of the teacher replay tool in Uganda, let's move to Pablo in Colombia. Examples of assessment you're using?
Thank you, Bo. So, yeah, when I thought about playfulness in assessments, I thought of an example of history and social studies. You know, in Colombia, we have to understand the sources of violence, and there was a very important event back in 1948, which was called El Bogotazo, and there was a very important political leader, Gaitán, who was killed. He was meant to be president, he was killed, and it became like a turning point in our history, a lot of violence and riots. And I brought this hat, you know, as a cue, because at that time, you know, people were like gentlemen, you know, they would dress up in Bogota, they would wear hats and nice suits. No, people no longer use that in Colombia, only people with bald heads like me use them. But yeah, when you work with students, you need to connect them to how life was at that time, you know, how people would think. And that's a very important event in our history, in our country. So when I was working with a teacher, her name is Vanessa Osa, you know, she's a social studies teacher. She's now a curriculum coordinator. And she was trying to assess the learning of their students based on that event. And what she designed was actually a Facebook profile. And she asked her students, actually I brought it here, okay, how would the Facebook profile of a character like Gaitán would be like? You know, and for me this was fascinating, because on the one hand we use performances of understanding, you know, at Alianza Educativa, and this is a very complex performance, because you have to make it very simple. Okay, how would Gaitán, you know, this political leader, describe himself on Facebook, right? You cannot copy this from any book, from any source. You know, you need to come up with something novel and innovative, but you also you're putting a lot of historical thinking skills on place. So using sources, connecting or using evidence, you know, connecting causes and consequences, creating historical narratives, and that's how an assessment. An example of this kind of assessments. I've seen other teachers using memes. You know how would you describe this historical event on a meme? Actually, when we were discussing, Camilla, you said, okay, next time maybe a TikTok video. You know, but in the end, these are kind of very powerful assessments that connect with something that is very important for students, like Facebook, like TikTok, whatever, but in a meaningful way to use that learning and apply that knowledge to their context and reality.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So you're actually using the power of new media and technologies and connect it to the cultural heritage and stories and so forth. I really like it. So do everyone have Facebook, or is it something the teacher facilitates to make this?
Students have, I mean, they
Yeah.
use Facebook all the time.
Yeah.
So for them, this is very relevant, you know, and
Yeah.
but yeah, they have it, they use it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So let's move then now to Europe with Rob. In terms of, well, you also work all over the world, but one of the examples you're using for assessments, please share. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we saw some very nice examples of assessment, and when I do stuff like this, I almost hear the people at home thinking, okay, and how am I grading this exactly? Because we all make that link between the word assessment, we all link it to testing.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like to use the word assessment, because it's immediately linked to testing. And for me, what it should be linked to is assessing. We should be assessing the student's needs.
Yeah.
We should be assessing if we did a good job, not if the student did a good job. I don't need any grades for that. So, because it should be about making kids grow, making students grow professionally and with everything else. So I thought, well, who is an expert in growing? And I think farmers are experts in growing stuff. So one of the staff members here arranged these two plants for me to to make an impression of this example, because everybody knows, and a farmer especially knows, that there is absolutely no point in telling this plant that this one is 5 centimeters taller. There's no point in that at all. But we're treating students like that on a daily basis.
Yes.
We're comparing them, while we absolutely know that there is no average student, that no student wants to become the other student at all.
Yeah.
So what we're actually doing is talking the student down. So, for instance, farmers don't pull this plant out of the ground to see how the roots are doing, because they know that this plant will be it will grow slower then. They keep the plant in the ground as long as possible. What I'm doing at the moment, touching it, farmer wouldn't do that. What do farmers to make plants grow? In my opinion, they do one thing, they aren't doing one thing absolutely, there's one thing they absolutely don't do, that's touching them. So keep your hands off children. They're not comparing their plants. What they do is they make sure that the plant gets the right amount of water, the right soil, and the right amount of sunlight. So farmers are influencing circumstances. And that's what we need to do when we assess. So we need to have a look at the child and start thinking about, what does this child need now? And how can I facilitate that without comparing him with somebody else, without judgment, but with adding something in the circumstances of the child, which makes them grow. And that's, for me, is assessing and not assessment.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that's a great example and analogy back to growth and the organic growth and the respect of the individual in this process. So how does it look like? Is it a mindset of the educator, or does it also require practical tools to apply this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I do it a lot as well, teaching and preaching, there's not a lot of difference. So we are trained to be teachers. And unfortunately, most of our training was on how to preach. We should be trained as observers. So what I try to do with the people I'm fortunate enough to train, I like to teach them how to get in that observant modus, because it's all about observing. As soon as you start preaching, people are going to follow you. And when people are going to follow you, it's a narrow line for developing on. But we know that kids need to swerve around, you know? So for me, I would almost say, stop preaching and start observing. And then when you see something that you think, okay, now I have to intervene, don't. Wait for it. Because probably one of the other students will intervene. If you wait for it, if you're patient. If not, you can ask the other student, why are you not intervening? Why are you not helping him? You see he is in trouble. The last thing you do is address the kid yourself. That's the last resort. And if you do that, then you really need to think about the fact, am I the guy to help him or should I get somebody else in? And that's what I'm trying to train people. And
Yeah.
so I'm building courses on that. and
Yeah.
That's quite exciting.
Yeah, so it's a collective responsibility also to help each other. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are social networkers.
Yeah, yeah.
We love, and
Yeah.
especially kids in
Yeah.
our schools,
Yeah.
they need to connect with other
Yeah.
people. They need to get out there.
Yeah.
They need to feel part of
Yeah.
something and not be compared with others.
Thank you so much.
He has value,
Yes.
and he has value.
Yeah. So this is like, I really enjoy the table here, like a diversity of assessments that is practical, meaningful to the situation, and I would say enjoyable. You can experiment, you can test and try it out. So I wonder then, if that seems to work in your context, why is it not much more available? Why everyone not beginning to use tools like this? So I wonder if you can reflect a little bit, what would help educators to make much more use of things like this? So let's say in this example, Camilla, like it is probably more messy. You need to it's more flexible. You need
Play is messy.
Yeah. How do you help educators? Or what would help your school to make more use of these?
I don't think they need to use these exact tools, but the mindset for us, playful learning is a mindset, and I think that is important. It can look in so many ways. Assessment for me is reflecting, and we might have some language and wording from different countries here, but it's about reflecting on your own practice and what you do, and it's actually the same for the teachers and for us as leaders. So I think it's the reflecting on your practice and learn from it to the next step. I think that's where we grow.
Yeah.
So when I work and when I discuss with I feel we learn together.
Yeah.
I think we have a community of equal learners in many ways. The teachers are so good at following the children's motivation and lead, and that is being a risk taker. I think that's a choice you make in life, and that is where you say yes to the mess. Yeah. You can welcome all emotions, because learning is frustrating, and you can also celebrate learning together. So for us at ISB, it's the shared learning, and reflection takes time.
Absolutely. And
so for me as a leader, I will also acknowledge that it takes time. So we set aside time to reflect with and on our own.
Yeah. Great example.
That was a very short version.
But it is a mindset, and it takes time to reflect and to take risks, because it may not work as it usually do.
And I don't know about the plants, but I mean, I guess they sometimes pause to reflect in order to grow. I think it's more you need
for instance, then Mauro, you were pointing to the fact that there's only probably 10, 12 minifigures here, but you are mentioning a classroom with 40, 50, maybe 60 students, and then tools like this to observe and document. Practically, how does one make that work?
Well, I believe that, I share, of course, what Camilla was saying, meaning that I totally agree with her that the point of reflection is paramount. But in our context, what can help this reflection to take place, because even having another person in the classroom, it's a point of that helps the reflection.
Yes.
But in order for that to happen, you need to have a strong leadership that knows where they want to go.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest problems is always to convince somehow the leaders that this is the way forward, because leaders are in a way too much driven by what Rob was saying, this assessment as a test. And parents want numbers. So to stop and think and change, it takes a revolution that needs a very strong leadership that is aware of the direction that they're taking. So the greatest point of entry for all this is to have the leaders on board even before presenting the tools or presenting the innovation to the teachers.
Yeah, a very good example. But I also say, I heard you say, to some degree, the app is almost easier than pen and paper.
Yeah, absolutely. The app has been developed in collaboration, of course, with FHI 360 that was the spearhead of all this program in Uganda, Bangladesh, and Colombia. And notwithstanding the problem of penetration of internet, penetration of maybe this kind of devices, the teachers, even if they have only one device in 7 of them, they pass this device all over, because The application is very intuitive, it's very simple, full of simple tips, and somehow it looks much less messy and crowded than the paper version. So that's why even this kind of innovation sometimes make the teachers feel part of the global world, and it's an innovation that triggers the interest of the teachers.
But also very structured. I think it's a very structured way to gather documentation and grow from that.
Absolutely.
I think that's
because,
a big win on that.
The application has a reflection part that starts before the lesson. One has to reflect on what they have to do. And then after the lesson for the teacher, after the lesson for the students, after the lesson for the observant teacher. So basically it is
very helpful. Absolutely. So Pablo, educators to use like new media like Facebook, connecting to history, what can help them, or what have helped your educators to use tools like this? Is it technology? Is it a mindset? Is it what could be more fitting?
Well, I think it's more like a mindset, and we need to spend more time like thinking like our students, and experiencing, how they live the school. So spending time like being in a classroom, and being students again. And then you say, how would I like to be treated, from the teachers, what would like generate creativity and interest in myself, right? And when you spend time on professional development activities, you get this kind of ideas and examples, just doing creativity workshops, for instance, right? But you need to just get out of the box. Sometimes you can also say, okay, let's forbid using essays as an assessment, because we're so used to those kind of assessments, like, okay, you have to students to put them in writing essays. Of course, that's very important and useful, but sometimes you need to say, okay, let's get rid of essays, and we need to find another way of doing that. Eventually you combine them, right? Of course, and you mix different strategies, but sometimes you need to force that creative process, so that we start thinking about things like Facebook that are relevant for students, and finally talk to the students, engage them. You get the answers. If you ask them, they will respond quickly. They will tell you what they're interested in. Those would be some ideas.
And can you literally see that they find it much more enjoyable and take much more part in the learning process when you use approaches like this?
Yeah, because in the end it's fun. Right, and when something like Facebook is part of their daily lives, writing an essay, it's not, right? I mean, so suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, I have a Facebook profile, I interact with my friends all the time. Now I think of this historical character like myself on Facebook. Immediately that creates a connection, right? Interest, which is what you want, engagement, which is what you need, for reflection and for learning.
Thank you. Yes. So Rob, we spoke a little bit about what enables educators also, and the mindset and the growth and the collaboration. But you've also worked not only with one school, Agora, but also scaling it across many schools. So how does that work then when you're going to scale it to educators in several schools? Like what would help them in your mind?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the second question. Is that okay? What would help them? Because the first question, well, we can talk about that for a long time, I guess. And we are still stumbling on that one. So what we need to think about is, what we really need to realize is that these kids are going to be 100 years of age. And only like 15 they are in a school. And we act like all the learning happens in the school. But actually they learn way more outside school. So what we need to look at is, how did these kids learn before they enter the building and after they enter the building, or how did they learn in the evenings? Because in my opinion, it's impossible to not learn. Your brain is always making connections and analyzing. So, and what I see in schools is, we came to this point like 100 years ago that testing was crucial, because somebody needed to make sure that these kids were learning. Well, it's a fact that they are learning. So now we are building on that mindset of, we need to test to get kids into learning, and to measure them, or at least see their growth. Well, I can see my daughter learning in the evening without any testing from my end. Just make sure that she's in the right circumstances, she has the right tools around it, she starts playing, she starts fooling around, She has I've put a keyboard in I'm not a musician at all.
Yeah.
I bought a keyboard. Within a couple of days, she was playing keyboard. How did she learn it? Well, not by me. She went to YouTube. So she built her own learning environment. And the only thing I needed to do is giving valuable feedback.
Yeah.
And valuable feedback in the beginning when she starts playing the keyboard, you can say, well, great, you're doing music, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, my feedback isn't valuable anymore. It's average, you know.
Yeah.
So then she needs a musician who tells her what is exactly good at what she's doing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing at home,
Yeah.
changing her circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be doing in schools as well.
Absolutely, I think that's a great example. It's again binding the ecology around the schools, understanding where the family background is, and I would say also in the light of what we do, create much more opportunities for families to be able to do this. So educators can make that link.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we as educators, I'm avoiding the word teachers, we as educators have an important role because we need to learn kids how to influence their circumstances. Because when they leave us, they have 80 years of life ahead. And they should own their own circumstances, should be able to change them, to put themselves into learning positions, but especially also to help other people stay in their learning positions.
Yes.
To facilitate as well.
Yeah.
So that, in my opinion, that is the main role of us in education.
Yeah. And they need to keep learning. They need to keep being curious and excited about it. Yeah. So as we round up here now with a few minutes left, I'm trying to figure out if we should make this work. What's one key thing we should change? If we were able to take one thing away, I think Pablo mentioned traditional essays, or is there one thing we could remove in the current way the system operates to be much more able to support things like this? So if you have any quick 20-second thoughts on what is a key barrier one could remove to make this change more visible, what could that be? And maybe we'll start with Rob this time and then go this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at Agora we quit with making lesson plans and timetables.
Yeah.
Because timetables forces a certain group in a certain room, and if you have a good book, it also forces everybody to do Pythagoras on the 19th of November next year without knowing any student.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Well, I think, in primary we see a lot of playfulness usually in Colombia, in pre-K, but in middle and high school not, because now we're serious, now we're grown-ups, we need to focus, study, and it starts with us, educators, like changing the mindset and say we can also have fun, in the upper grades. That's important. If we shape that, everyone can understand learning, comes along with fun and with play.
Yeah, symbolically, I think that we could remove the doors of the classrooms, meaning we would open up the classroom and let the facilitators understand, or the educators understand that that place is a place of learning for everyone, and they are the first one that have to learn if they want to grow. And so this one is a way to remove all this idea that I am the owner of the knowledge and I'm the one that possesses the knowledge because I'm the teacher.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I like that. You're very practical, but also as an analogy. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Camilla. Yeah.
Okay. Because I like the development, and I think it's important. I think we should just remove, or at least minimize, those standardized final exams, because they only add unnecessary stress to any young mind, and they don't give us much.
Yeah.
So I think remove those standardized tests and exams.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's very provocative and probably very helpful. So thank you so much for making these ideas happen. Yeah. So thank you to the Roundtable panelists here and for playing along with the prompts and materials and some really inspiring examples. So I hope everyone out there enjoyed the examples, and it's something that you are going to be inspired to try out yourself or develop your own types of assessments that are much more meaningful and joyful for learners. So that's Roundup for the Roundtable.